homage to the Triple Gem. So here at the monastery, they're doing a 7-day Paritta chanting. And I've seen these chantings before in Toronto. They you kind of rotate, monks rotate, one batch comes and another batch comes, and they chant these Parittas the whole night. This one seems to be going for 7 days. And I was asking what the reason was, kind of different reasons they're doing it. But the primary one is for protection or for, to solve some problem, something like this. Or people just want something auspicious, and kind of lay people have been coming and, see them giving out Paritta thread and these things. And can be a nice, is kind of a cultural thing, doing chanting or doing a ritual. There's various expressions of this in various cultures, various places. So one of the reasons that people turn to religion or turn to, you say like mysterious forces, is for protection, kind of looking for something that can give a sense of safety in a very uncertain world, in a world where things can change very quickly, where one's relationships can change, where one's health can change, where one's livelihood can change, where many different things can change. People are looking for a sense of safety. And it's not always clear the causes and effects, why these things change and why they become unsafe. In the modern world, we like to think that, very advanced and can figure out the reasons why. Kind of this rational brain, think up the cause and think up the effect, and can kind of figure out why it is that things happen, and plan for danger, plan for change. But it doesn't really work out that way. And kind of the most rational societies on earth, they rise, and good things happen to them, and there's reasons, and they also fall. And kind of bad things happen to them, there's reasons for that. And the way that these causes and effects interact can be quite complex, can be something really unusual. And for that reason, it can become this idea that, better look for a way to become safe from this, better look for a way to protect myself from this. So religion, rituals, perform that function to a certain extent, and kind of chant or say something very auspicious over and over again. Maybe that has some positive energies, and maybe it does actually have some positive energies, and that might help things if something is going wrong, that the cause is something a little bit more unknown or a little bit more mysterious, or maybe there's beings out there that will help if one does this, a proper ritual and an appropriate ritual. So that's one type of protection, kind of this protection that one might get from, doing a ritual or, saying a name or praying or whatever it might be. This is a protection, and sometimes it might work. I remember when I was a new monk, I went to visit this monastery, and the venerable who I'd gone to visit, he'd written this book on the Vinaya, and inside the Vinaya it has some really unusual things about like spirit possession and other things like this. And sometimes he'd put like this exclamation point beside some of these descriptions in the Vinaya of like some of these more unusual things. So he's kind of trying to point out that maybe these things didn't really happen at all, and fine to be skeptical. Went to his monastery, and he was telling all these stories about his time in Thailand and some of the really unusual things that he saw there. And so there's one story, it was funny, and he told the story how when he first went to ordain, they went to a dana where they bring this food out and they offer it up, and then they brought in this girl, and she had all these amulets on her, and these different chains, and they have all these little amulets in Thailand, and she was like thrashing back and forth. And so then they started chanting, and they have this thing called an aspergillum, which is these sticks, and they dip it into the water, and they'd spray the girl with this aspergillum. And every time she got hit with the water, it was like an electric shock went through her body. And then finally she passed out. And then he said they just brought out the dana and started serving it like nothing was going on. So then she came to, and when she came to, she was speaking in a man's voice. And what the man said was that he was a fellow who lived in a nearby village who committed suicide. And he was, kind of heading down to hell, and he noticed this kind of girl who was a little bit dopey, so he kind of went in there and and kind of took possession of her body. So this kind of battle, I guess, between the girl and him, and people knew that she was possessed. So they said, well, you've got to leave. You can't stay there. You can't stay in this body. It doesn't belong to you. And did some things and forced that spirit out. But what it turned out was interesting was actually that the family in that other village had hidden that this young man had committed suicide. And when they asked, they found that out, that it was true that he committed suicide. So there are these unusual things in the world. There's beings that one can't see. There's ghosts, that's there in the canon. There's devas, there's gods, that's there in the canon. There's also good forces. And there's things that influence or can affect one's life that one doesn't know how to control or can't fully see. Not just those beings, maybe there's causes and effects that come together. So for protection, people go to various things. They go to a kind of ritual, or they might go to like an amulet, They might go to, like spirits, kind of praying to this or that spirit or this or that powerful being for protection. So in Buddhism, the most powerful protection that one can have is the protection that one gets from one's actions. So there's all these various forces in the universe. You've got, various beings, the non-material beings. You've got physical beings with a physical body. And there's different kind of laws that those realms operate on. The kind of non-material ones, they have different laws. And this physical one has its own set of laws. And they kind of, those laws can interact as well. But these realms, the most powerful thing in all of them is this force of kamma, this force that depends on a person's actions. So one of the really interesting things about kamma is that the Buddha doesn't just describe it as like action, like you take an action and you get a result, although it does have that. He describes it as intention. There's kind of, kamma is intention. So if you intend and do a particular action by body, by speech or mind, then the result comes from that. Danger comes from that. Safety comes from that, depending on the intention, depending on the result. Now, of course, there's going to be things that you do in the present moment as a result of actions that can influence that. Go walking down a dark alley in New York, or El Salvador, or some place, and in the middle of the night, and that could be an unwise action, and kind of an unwise intention that can bring danger. But in terms of the more mysterious ways in which action affects us and we're affected by our actions, the intention either for good or for evil is a thing that either brings safety or brings danger. So there's this kind of cryptic phrase in the Dhammapada, which is mind is the forerunner of all phenomena. All phenomena are led by mind, created by mind. Now that word phenomena is Dhamma in Pali. And Dhamma can either mean like a mental phenomenon. You've got the mind and Dhammas, so the mind and mental ideas. It could mean that, so it could mean a mental state. But it also means phenomenon. It can also mean all phenomena. So there's some really cryptic passages, in the canon, where the Buddha talks about a person generating the perception, all this is unreal. And there's things in the canon that kind of touch on that very briefly, but it's not fully laid out because the Buddha wasn't trying to set out this kind of ontological scheme. But when we look at the way that kamma may operate for people, there's something quite mysterious about that. And kind of looking at kind of the way that physics operates, especially kind of quantum physics. If you measure for certain results, if you measure for a particle or a wave at the smallest level, then depending on your measurement, the reality kind of collapses into that particle or wave. And I guess you could say the mainstream interpretation of quantum physics. And so in these kind of really unusual things at the smallest level, there are ways in which a person's thoughts, their intentions, have an effect on the physical world. So there are these ideas in the world like luck, and people really lucky, people really unlucky. Auspicious things happen, inauspicious things happen. And there's elements of the world that may actually pull themselves together, that may form themselves together based on a person's intentions. So there's a sutta in which the Buddha says that there's nowhere that an evildoer can hide from his action. Why is that? Because you yourself know what you did. But more specifically, in terms of the unusual ways that the world may operate, you've got this thing from quantum physics where you measure for a wave, you get a wave, you measure for a particle, you get a particle. There's also this blurriness to reality, apparently, at the smallest scales, where you can measure position but not velocity, and vice versa. The more you measure one, the less precise another one gets. So when a person engages in an intention, there may be certain ways actually in which the world pulls itself together to give the person what they need. There's also ways in which it creates habits in the mind, so that a person's mind inclines towards particular directions. You can see the world as being a bunch of different opportunities. Imagine there's all these different doors in the world, and depending on your intention, depending on the inclination of your mind, you're attracted to go through certain doors, to take certain opportunities, and repelled by other ones. You get these people sometimes who have everything going for them. They've got opportunities right in their face and they don't take it. So this inclination of the mind is another aspect of karma. It's one in which the intuition almost guides one towards particular results, particular futures. So wherever a person goes, whatever they're looking for safety, a person does these chants, that may have some kind of proximal effect. It may have some good effect, put out some good vibes. But ultimately, the safety for a person in their practice comes from the way that they intend and the way that they act. If a person acts well, then good things happen to them. If they act poorly, then bad things happen to them. But this also requires a measure of faith. It requires a measure of endurance, because doing these actions and not knowing exactly how they're going to lead to the result is something quite uncertain. So this faculty of faith is also there in protection. And one of the things that can really throw people off and cause them to do actions that are quite harmful is having fear arise in the mind. And when a person gets afraid, when they get worried about what they're going to be able to do, what they're going to be able to do to keep themselves safe, that's when they sometimes do really unskillful things out of fear. And can't plan for the future, so might as well, abandon my precepts just for now, just to get this little bit of safety. Or cheat a little bit, lie a little bit, just to get this little bit of safety. I've got to get out of the situation, so I might as well do those things. So having this faith and having this kind of these right actions, these are the things that can give a person the safety that they're looking for. And essentially, where we get the teachings on what's right action and where we get our faith from, if one is a Buddhist, is from the Buddha. So Buddhists often recite this kind of phrase, I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dhamma, I go for refuge to the Sangha, and recite it 3 times. And there is a kind of power to that, just kind of reciting it or thinking the Buddha is my teacher. But actually, to take refuge in the Buddha means that when things are difficult, when things are uncertain, then one sticks with his teachings, even when one can't see how far in front of one can't see where they're actually going to bring the result. When it's more convenient to cheat, more convenient to lie. When fear comes and one wants to, drop one's practice and, go for what seems like a certain route, but is actually quite uncertain. And instead, step into something completely unknown with faith that as long as my intention is good, as long as I keep acting in line with the Dhamma, this next step, I'll be able to figure out what to do. And the future ahead is good. So there's this chant that monks sometimes do, is kind of to many refuges they go, to parkland shrines, to basically the various spirits, and to many different things people go to refuge. But that refuge is not secure. That refuge is not supreme. The supreme refuge is to go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And where are they pointing to? They're pointing to our actions. They're pointing to our intentions. They're pointing to what we do to form the world. The mind is the forerunner of all things. And what is it that we're intending? What is it that we're doing that's building our world right now? So going to refuge to the Buddha, taking these things as one's mainstay, is something that's easy to do in word, but it's more difficult to do in times of uncertainty, in times of fear, in times when one's whole world seems to be falling away, to take another step in the right direction, to take another step in the direction of the Dhamma. But if one does this, this is sometimes when, after sometimes a few steps or so, one finds a new opportunity, one finds a new door, and things open up for one in ways that one wouldn't expect. So as monks, you see this sometimes in the way things come together for various monastics in different times in their life. As there was one monk I recently saw, and he ended up with he was in a number of really difficult situations, kind of lost the place where he was staying, and then lost the support of a lot of senior monks. But one really admirable quality about that monk actually is that he has this kind of faith to just keep going in the Dhamma. And later, after in ways he couldn't predict, he was able to get a new kuti, and actually looks like he's going to be building a monastery before long, which he'd always kind of hoped that he'd be able to do. But somehow things had never come together, but spontaneously these things all worked out. So it's good to keep it in mind. Things are not going well. I mean, one can, chant something 100,000 times, which is not a bad thing. One can pray to another being. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But those refuges are not supreme. Those refuges are not secure. What supreme refuge is to practice the Dhamma in line with the Dhamma, to make sure that one's actions are in line with the Buddha's teachings. And this requires faith. It requires the faith to step into an unknown future, just trusting that doing good, that training the mind to become pure, will bring the results that one is looking for, although one can't see too far ahead. And this is truly going for refuge to the Buddha. This is one of the ways one truly goes to refuge to the Buddha. It's one of the ways one truly goes for refuge to the Dhamma. One of the ways one truly goes for refuge to the Sangha is by learning to have conviction in the power of one's own actions, and to take the actions that are right even when things are uncertain.